Y'all know we've been live streaming every single day, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing by now, oh, well, we just took TJ Hawkinson, so this means we're going to target Kirk Cousins later on. Or, oh, we just took Jalen Waddle. This means we're going to be going after Tua in round 9. But stacking in fantasy football is incredibly important for a multitude of different reasons. We dove into the exact numbers of why you should be doing it, the specific stacks we should be targeting, and honestly, the number one stack you would expect is actually a massive avoid. But before we get into it, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you play fantasy football, I can guarantee you are going to love flogfantasy.com. There you can find all of my fantasy football rankings. Not only you can find all my fantasy football rankings, but also all the premium content of all your favorite content creators. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK, you are going to get 30% off any subscription. And with promo code FLOCK, yours truly is going to go through and break down your fantasy football team in a podcast for you. But I think that should be it. And let's go ahead and let's first talk about why stacking is important and why stacking works in the first place. Because we have to understand what we are doing every time we step into a fantasy football draft. We are attempting to overcome all the odds. If you are looking on average in a 12-team fantasy football league, you have an 8.3% chance to win your league. One team wins, 11 teams lose. Personally, I don't care if I get 12th. I don't care if I get 10th. I don't care if I get 8th. I don't care if I get 6th. I don't care if I get 4th. They're all the same to me. You win $0. You win zero glory. There's no point in any of it. The only thing that matters is being the one team that is able to overcome all the others and stand on top of the league. So whenever we are looking at that one team, you're having to go up against the odds. You are having to try to raise your ceiling, not raise your floor. Because if it's 11-1 and you're out there trying to make sure that you don't lose, you're destined to lose. You have to go into a draft with the expectation, I am going to win and everything has to go right for me to win. A perfect example of this is if you were to go through and take Travis Kelce in round 1, right? What has to happen with your first round draft pick for you to generally win in fantasy football? Now, of course, there will always be exceptions, but we're talking about the general. We are talking about the large sample, and we're not going to try to chase outliers. In general, if you take Travis Kelce in round 1 of your fantasy football draft, for you to win your league, you have to first see Travis Kelce stay healthy throughout the course of the entire season. Second, see Travis Kelce finish as the number 1 tight end in fantasy football. And if both those things were to occur, what else most likely goes with that, right? Because we can say, okay, well, if Travis Kelce is the number 1 tight end in fantasy, then you probably have Patrick Mahomes as a top 3 quarterback, right? Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to stay healthy throughout the course of the entire year. Patrick Mahomes at the same time is going to be top 3 in the NFL in passing yards, which is going to allow Travis Kelce to have that dominant league winning season that you have. So instead of going through and say taking Travis Kelce round 1 and then drafting Josh Allen in round 3, you have to get only one bet right if you were to go through and take Patrick Mahomes in round 3 instead of Josh Allen. So if you were to take Josh Allen and Travis Kelce, you have to get 2 separate bets right. That the Kansas City Chiefs passing offense is better than expected or at par of what it's expected to be this next season. And on top of this, you have to get the fact that the Buffalo Bills passing offense is an elite passing offense this next season. And instead, if you were to take Patrick Mahomes, you would only have to get one thing right. That one thing being that the Kansas City Chiefs are a top 3 offense this next year. You saw the same thing last season, right? Like if you were to go through, if you were to draft Tyreek Hill round 2, Jalen Waddle round 4, and then last season you picked up 2 at the very end of your fantasy football draft, you are making one bet. And that one bet is that the overall passing offense in Miami is better than expected. And if that one thing happens, then all of those guys will be massive league winners for you. Now, of course, it can always go wrong. It's not like you're guaranteed that one bet is going to hit. And instead, maybe you made the bet last year that, oh my gosh, the Indianapolis Colts are going to be better than people expect. And you went through and you drafted Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, and Matt Ryan. And of course, if you were to have done that, you were crushed. You had no shot to win. But that goes back to what we were talking about previously. I'm not trying to play to get 6th place in my fantasy football league. I want to either be last or first. Hell, if I can be first in 50% of my leagues and last in the other 50%, that is a way better outcome than being in 6th place in 100% of them. So that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to make consolidated bets that polarize our outcomes. And if we're diving into the numbers here, you're going to see some pretty shocking things. The first thing is the number one stack you would be going for doesn't even work. Now, of course, let me talk about the overall data that's being used. We are getting this tool from RotoViz. This is going to be a stack explorer that explores the data of underdog drafts from last season. Now, why it's very important to be looking at underdog best ball drafts in particular is because, one, those are the drafts we're getting on the live stream. Right now, we're doing them every single day. And in my mind, the place you should be drafting this next season. And of course, if you're not drafting with us on Underdog Fantasy already, go sign up, use promo code FLOCK. When you use promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Also, with promo code FLOCK with the link in the description, you are going to be getting my 2023 fantasy football rankings. And at the same time, you will get a free trial to flockfantasy.com. But nonetheless, another reason why we are going to be using Underdog, not just because they're the best, but also at the same time, they have the largest data set that we can actually work from. Every league on Underdog Fantasy is a real money fantasy football best ball draft. So if you are looking at this, you are looking at over 100,000 teams drafted last season that we can go through and we can analyze the entire data set. And that's what RotoViz has done. And the first stack we are going to look at, for an example, will be your quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1. So for example, this is going to be Kirk Cousins paired up with Justin Jefferson, right? Where if we're going to be looking at the win rate, so your probability of going through and winning your league, if you stacked your quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1, it was 8.1%. If you did not do this, it was 8.4%. So wait, does stacking not work? What is going on here? It's the exact opposite of what you were wanting to see. The top 2% teams across all leagues as well actually underperformed if you had a quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1 stacked together. So yeah, this is not encouraging to see for stacking. Now, I don't exactly know why this did not work this past season, but I have a hypothesis. And the main one being is if you look at the amount of times that a quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1 was stacked together in comparison to the rest of the field, the majority of people are going through and doing this. The majority of people understand, yes, if I take Justin Jefferson, I want to target Kirk Cousins later on. And what's happening in a lot of these drafts, this is what I've noticed. I drafted over 700 teams on Underdog last year and won $150,000 on Underdog. Is when they take Justin Jefferson, they think the only way this team's going to be good is if I reach on Kirk Cousins. I have to have Kirk Cousins, so they take him significantly ahead of ADP while it may not fit their roster construction. That is my number one hypothesis on why this did not work this past season. But you are going to see that there were so many other potential spots where you actually could win with stacking and improved your overall win rate. Like going over to our next scenario, right? Instead of looking at your quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1 paired up, what if you had your quarterback 1 and wide receiver 2? So for instance, this is you take Kirk Cousins and then the wide receiver 2 in Minnesota. You draft Kirk Cousins and Jordan Addison on the same roster. You are going to see that you have a ton of success with this in comparison to the first option. You are looking at an advance rate of 8.9%, which is well above the average for all other teams, and at the same time, well above the quarterback 1 and wide receiver 1 stacked. And my hypothesis and why this makes sense is you get the benefit from stacking, and you are not seeing too many other people go through and reach to get that stack. You're not seeing someone take Jordan Addison and then going, okay, I need to reach on Kirk Cousins in 2 rounds based on ADP and disregard my roster construction to get this done. So if instead you're getting them falling to you at a value and you're not paying the utmost premium price tag for them, it looks like this is working. You're also seeing the top 2% up at 2.32% for quarterback 1, wide receiver 2 pairing. So you're seeing This is what had success last year in comparison. Now, something else that had success as well is if you were looking at stacking your quarterback 1, wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 2, right? So this is you take Kirk Cousins and you have both Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. The advance rate here is going to be higher than baseline, still going to be a little bit lower than just having your quarterback 1 and wide receiver 2 stacked. But what I do want to point out specifically, if you are getting into underdog best ball drafts where you are in massive large field tournaments where it's a $25 buy-in, $3 million first prize for Best Ball Mania, $15 million prize pool, and we're going for the highest ceiling possible. What we actually saw this past season is if you're looking at top 2% finishes, you actually had significantly fewer top 2% finishes with both the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 double stacked with the quarterback in comparison to just the quarterback and wide receiver 2. That is very interesting to note. I think that this is a strong strategy if you're playing in just a regular redraft fantasy football league. So if you're just playing with your overall high school buddies, right? And you're going, man, it's a 12-team league. I don't have to worry about a fantasy football playoff tournament at the very end. Sure, go ahead, take Jefferson, Addison, Cousins all in the same team. But if you're in a massive large field tournament on Underdog, maybe that's not the best thing to do. Now, that's not to say you should not double stack your quarterback, because you can actually find so much success if you do it, but you don't pour all your resources into the position. And this kind of makes sense, right? Because if you were to take, say, Tyreek Hill round 1 this year and Jalen Waddle round 2 this year, and then grab that double stack with Tua later on, you are so invested into the Miami Dolphins with your first and second round selections that really the only way that your team has truly top level upside is if Tua leads the NFL in passing yards. Like, that's what has to happen. But if you still double stack your quarterback with maybe cheaper options, right? Instead, you grab, say, your quarterback, a wide receiver 2 on that team, and then the tight end 1. For instance, this may be you go ahead and you grab Justin Fields, Cole Kmet, and Darnell Mooney. Here you are seeing great success on the top end range of outcomes. You're getting up to 2.6% of the top 2% across the board, which is phenomenal in terms of your overall ceiling. And it makes sense because if that one offense has a massive explosion and you didn't invest everything into that one offense, you could hit other spots as well. So you could get the bonus of that offense performing well as some other random players that you were able to add in. Now, one thing that I want to discuss as well before we get to other stacking options that may work versus don't is handcuff running backs, because this is what we've seen a lot in terms of people going through and trying to make sure that they have a high floor in fantasy football, right? But what we've always said is if you're going out of your way and trying to handcuff your running backs, if you're the guy going through and taking, say, Kenneth Walker in round 4 and then Zach Charbonnet in round 9, just in case Zach Charbonnet is the starter or Kenneth Walker gets injured, your ceiling will be significantly lower. You're seeing a top 2% outcome 1.9% of the time. So you're going down from baseline. But what you are also getting at the same time is your floor raised. You're seeing a bottom 2% outcome only at 1.5% of the time. So this is kind of intuitive. We've been talking about this for years, but just to prove it to you with numbers here, if you handcuff your running backs, you take the running back 1 and the running back 2 on the same team. You take Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. You take, in years past, Zeke and Tony Pollard. Your floor will be raised, but your ceiling will be lowered. That is the exact opposite of what I am trying to do. The only time I would try to do that is if I'm in a league with my high school buddies and loser has to go get a tattoo or loser has to go spend 24 hours in a Waffle House. Sure, if I want to make sure I don't get last, handcuff your running backs. But if you're trying to win some money, if you're trying to get first, doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, a couple other things that will work is building in stacks without quarterbacks. And you've seen me do this a lot in live streams. I'll go through and say, okay, well, I took Saquon Barkley, so let me go ahead and just build in and make that one bet that the Giants offense is a little bit better than expected. Let me grab Wan'Dale Robinson a little later, right? So if you're looking at a running back 1 and wide receiver 2 pairing, even without the quarterback, you're going to find that this both raises your advance rate as well as your top end, your top 2% outcomes. Here you have 8.7% for your advance rate and about 2.2% in the 2% best teams. Hopefully that made sense. I know it probably didn't. But nonetheless, this just goes to show you can stack teammates and find success even without the quarterback. And we can look at this as well. If you were to go through and pair up, say, the wide receiver 2 in an offense with the wide receiver 4. Now, this may work for a multitude of different reasons, right? If you go through and draft the wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 4 in the same offense, and then all of a sudden you find that, hell, the top 2% range of outcomes is almost up at 2.5%. You are crushing the field with the highest ceiling possible. There are 2 reasons why this may work. One, naturally, if the offense explodes and is way better than you expect, then you could get spike weeks from both players. But on top of this, what happens if you were to go through and grab, say, Sky Moore and Marquez Valdes-Scantling this season at an extremely cheap price tag in Kansas City, and then Travis Kelce were to go down? And you not only have a massive hit with Sky Moore getting the boosted target share, but you also get the massive hit with Marquez Valdes-Scantling as well. Now, this last chart is specifically going to be for best ball on Underdog. You're not going through taking a wide receiver 4 of any NFL offense in a regular redraft league, but across the board, everything else stands here. I understand we're looking at Underdog data, and I would say stacking in best ball is slightly more important than stacking in your traditional redraft format, but almost regardless, stacking in your traditional redraft format will work given the underlying thought process and the underlying reasoning behind this draft strategy. Now, like I said, very specific scenarios like taking a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 4 on the same NFL offense and pairing those guys together, that's specifically going to be for best ball. But if we're looking at those other options of saying taking the running back 1 on a team and the wide receiver 2, you take CMC and Brandon Ayuk, and then all of a sudden the 49ers are much better off than you'd assume, and they both hit. Or maybe you go through and you maybe take the quarterback, tight end 1, and wide receiver 2. So you go through and you draft, say, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and Zay Flowers. They all hit in Baltimore. This is going to work for best ball. This is going to work for redraft. This is going to work for dynasty. And I'd really encourage you to try to get creative in the way that you're building your teams here. And don't just go into it and thinking, oh, I drafted Justin Jefferson, so I need to draft Kirk Cousins. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, please do not hesitate to reach out to us and let me know. I'd be super happy to help you out in any way I can. If you want to get my fantasy football rankings, those can be found on flockfantasy.com. At the same time, if you want to get into a fantasy football draft today, you can do that on Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you're using promo code FLOCK for a 100% deposit match and my 2023 fantasy football rankings. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and really hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.